I'm going to be reading from a book called The Wonder That Was India. You're seeing that? The Wonder That Was India. And this is how Indian culture was discovered by the West. The discovery of ancient India. The ancient civilizations of India differs from those of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece in that its traditions have been preserved without a break down to the present day. Until the advent of the archaeologist, the peasant of Egypt or Iraq had no knowledge of the culture of his forefathers, and it is doubtful whether his Greek counterpart had any but the vaguest ideas about the glory of Periclean Athens. Pericles was the great orator in Athens, and they say that he put stones in his mouth when he went along the beach to practice giving speeches. In each case, there had been an almost complete break with the past. On the other hand, the earliest Europeans to visit India found a culture fully conscious of its own antiquity, a culture which indeed exaggerated that antiquity and claimed not to have fundamentally changed. Oh, just a second. The street cleaner's going through. On the other hand, the earliest Europeans to visit India found a culture fully conscious of its own antiquity, a culture which indeed exaggerated that antiquity and claimed not to have fundamentally changed for many thousands of years. To this day, legends known to the humblest Indian recall the names of shadowy chieftains who lived nearly 1,000 years before Christ, and the Orthodox Brahmin in his daily worship repeats hymns composed even earlier. India and China have in fact the oldest continuous cultural traditions in the world. Until the last half of the 18th century, Europeans made no real attempt to study India's ancient past, and her early history was known only from the briefest passages in the works of Greek and Latin authors. A few devoted missionaries in the peninsula gained a deep understanding of contemporary Indian life and a brilliant mastery of the vernaculars, but they made no real attempt to understand the historical background of the culture of the people among whom they worked. They accepted that culture at its face value, as very ancient and unchanging, and their only studies of India's past were the nature of speculations linking the Indians with the descendants of Noah and the vanished empires of the Bible. Meanwhile, a few Jesuits succeeded in mastering Sanskrit, the classical language of India. One of them, Father Haxleden, who worked in Malabar from 1699 to 1732, compiled the first Sanskrit grammar in a European language, which remained in manuscript but was used by his successors. Another, Father Courdeau, in 1767, was probably the first student to recognize the kinship of Sanskrit and the languages of Europe, and suggested that the Brahmins of India were descended from one of the sons of Japhet, whose brothers migrated to the west. Yet the Jesuits, for all their studies, gained no real understanding of India's past. The foundations of Indology were laid independently in another part of India and by other hands. In the year 1783, one of the most brilliant men of the 18th century, Sir William Jones, 1746 to 1794, came to Calcutta as a judge of the Supreme Court under the Governor-Generalship of Warren Hastings, who himself had deep sympathy with both Muslim and Hindu culture. Jones was a linguistic genius who had already learnt all the more important languages of Europe, as well as Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, and had even obtained a smattering of Chinese with the aid of the very inadequate material available in Europe at the time. Before coming to India, he had recognized the relationship of European languages to Persian and had rejected the orthodox view of the 18th century that all these tongues were derived from Hebrew, which had been garbled at the Tower of Babel. Just an aside from me, I think today it's known that Jesus was speaking Aramaic. Okay, so now to continue with A.L. Basham, The Wonder That Was India. In place of this dogma, Jones suggested that Persian and the European languages were derived from a common ancestor, which was not Hebrew. Of the little band of Englishmen who administered Bengal for the Honorable East India Company, only one, Charles Wilkins, 1749 to 1836, had managed to learn Sanskrit. With the aid of Wilkins and friendly Bengali pandits, Jones began to learn the language. On the first day of 1784, the Asiatic Society of Bengal was founded on Jones' initiative and with himself as president. In the journal of this society, Asiatic Researches, the first real steps in revealing India's past were taken. In November 1784, the first direct translation of a Sanskrit work into English, Wilkins' Bhagavad Gita, was completed. This Wilkins followed in 1787 with the translation of the Hitopadesha. In 1789, Jones translated Kalidasa's Sakuntali, which went into 5 English editions in less than 20 years. This he followed by translations of the Gita Govinda in 1792 and the law book of Manu, published posthumously in 1794 under the title Institutes of Hindu Law. Several less important translations appeared in successive issues of Asiatic Researches. Jones and Wilkins were truly the fathers of Indology. They were followed in Calcutta by Henry Colebrook, 1765 to 1837, and Horace Hayman Wilson, 1789 to 1760. To the works of these pioneers must be added that of the Frenchman Antiquel Duperron, a Persian scholar who in 1786 published a translation of 4 Upanishads. And incidentally, Upanishad means sitting next to God. Published a translation of 4 Upanishads from a 17th century Persian version. The translation of the whole manuscript, consisting of 50 Upanishads, appearing in 1801. Interest in Sanskrit literature began to grow in Europe as a result of these translations. In 1795, the governor of French Republic founded the École de Langue Orientale Vivante, and there Alexander Hamilton, 1762 to 1824, one of the founding members of the Asiatic Society of Bengal, held prisoner on parole in France at the end of the Peace of Amiens in 1803, became the first person to teach Sanskrit in Europe. Isn't that interesting? He learned Sanskrit while he was in prison. It was from Hamilton that Friedrich Schlegel, the first German Sanskritist, learned the language. The first university chair of Sanskrit was founded at the Collège de France in 1814 and held by Leonard de Chenzay, while from 1818 onwards the larger German universities set up professorships. Sanskrit was first taught in England in 1805 at the Training College of the East India Company at Hertford. The earliest English chair was the Bowdoin Professorship at Oxford, first filled in 1832, when it was conferred upon H. H. Wilson, who had been an important member of the Asiatic Society of Bengal. Chairs were afterwards founded at London, Cambridge, and Edinburgh, and at several other universities of Europe and America. In 1816, Franz Bopp, 1791 to 1867, a Bavarian, on the basis of the hints of Sir William Jones. Remember, Sir William Jones was the great linguist who first came to India. He was born in 1746, and he came to India, and he was a judge of the Supreme Court. So, on the basis of the hints of Sir William Jones, succeeded in very tentatively reconstructing the common ancestor of Sanskrit and the classical languages of Europe, and comparative philology became an independent science. Comparative philology. In 1821, the French Société Asiatique was founded in Paris, followed 2 years later by the Royal Asiatic Society in London. From these beginnings, the work of the editing and studying of ancient Indian literature went on apace throughout the 19th century. Probably the greatest achievement of Indiological scholarship in 19th century Europe was the enormous Sanskrit-German dictionary, generally known as the St. Petersburg Lexicon, produced by the German scholars Otto Botlink and Rudolf Roth, and published in parts by the Russian Imperial Academy of Sciences from 1852 to 1875. England's greatest contribution to Sanskrit study were the splendid editions of the Rig Veda and the great series of authoritative annotative translations, Sacred Books of the East. Both of these works were edited by the great German Sanskritist Friedrich Max Müller, 1823 to 1900, who spent most of his working life as professor of comparative philology at Oxford. Meanwhile, the study of ancient Indian culture was proceeding in another direction. The first work of the Asiatic Society of Bengal had been almost entirely literary and linguistic, and most of the 19th century Indologists were primarily scholars working on written records. Early in the 19th century, however, the Bengal Society began to turn some of its attention to the material remains of India's past, as the East India Company's surveyors brought back many records of temples, caves, and shrines, together with early coins and copies of inscriptions in long-dead scripts. By working backwards from the current scripts, the older ones were gradually deciphered, until in 1837, a gifted amateur, James Prinsep, an official of the Calcutta Mint and secretary of the Asiatic Society of Bengal, interpreted for the first time the earliest Brahmi script and was able to read the edicts of the great emperor Ashoka. Among Prinsep's colleagues in the work of decipherment was a young officer of the Royal Engineers, Alexander Cunningham, the father of Indian archaeology. From his arrival in India in 1831, Cunningham devoted every minute he could spare from his military duties to the study of the material remains of ancient India, until in 1862 the Indian government established the post of archaeological surveyor, to which he was appointed. Until his retirement in 1885, he devoted himself to the unraveling of India's past with complete single-heartedness. Though he made no startling discoveries, and though his technique was, by modern archaeological standards, crude and primitive, there is no doubt that after Sir William Jones, Indology owes more to General Sir Alexander Cunningham than to any other worker in the field. Cunningham was assisted by several other pioneers, and though at the end of the 19th century the activities of the Archaeological Survey almost ceased, owing to niggardly government grants, by 1900 many ancient buildings had been surveyed and many inscriptions read and translated. Okay, so now I'm going to continue reading in this book. It's called Democracy is Self-Government by a guy named Percival. And what the consideration is did ancient civilizations know how to do things right? And what about the different civilizations, ancient ones that we're descended from? Here's the Egyptian one. And it was saying that India, the Indian civilization, didn't come from there. I'm doing a study now where I'm thinking that the Indian civilization did not come up from the north, but actually from the south. But first I want to master what is generally accepted in the universities today from these great translators who, then this book was compiled, The Wonder That Was India. This is pretty much your standard, you know, white bread kind of book about that the culture came down through the whiter north into the blacker south. But there's another way to look at it, and this other way has to do with who the masters are. There's a master that I studied with in India, and he's from the south. And the demonstration of the miracles means, do you have the science behind you that proves that your knowledge is correct? And these are different expressions of the Divine Mother in different parts of the world. This was a miraculous icon that was carried in Russian times, I think. The heads of battles for victory. It's supposed to have healing powers. And then, of course, this is the Virgin of Guadalupe. This is becoming very interesting to me because she appeared as a mulatto. And there was times of huge turbulence when the conquistadors were coming and being so ruthless to the natives in Mexico. And then this simple peasant has a vision of her, and it turns out the vision was right on a mound of where the Divine Mother was supposed to have manifested throughout the ages, you know, well before the white men came. And she was also known as the mistress, or the one who mastered the serpents. She could stand on the head of the serpent, and the serpent is oftentimes considered the kundalini, or sexual energy. And for those of you who study yoga, you'll know that really all of the postures is about the flexibility of the spine. And that's really what a snake is. He's just all spine. So let's carry on here about we the people. This is a chapter from the book Democracy is Self-Government, a guide for right living in the New Age. We the people are now determining the kind of democracy we will have in the future. Shall we choose to continue the devious way of make-believe democracy, or shall we take the straight way of genuine democracy? Make-believe is misrule. It turns to confusion and leads to destruction. The straight way of true democracy is to understand more about ourselves and to go on in ever-ascending degrees of progress. Progress not by speed of big business in buying and selling and expanding, not by speed in money-making, shows, thrills, and the drink habit excitement. The real enjoyment of progress is by increase in our capacity to understand things as they are, not the mere superficialities, and to make good use of life. Increase in capacity for being conscious and the understanding of life will make us, the people, ready for democracy. Over 30 years ago, it was alleged that World War I was a war against war, that it was a war to make the world safe for democracy. Such empty promises were doomed to disappoint. During those 30 years of anything but peace, assurance of peace and security had given place to uncertainty and fear. World War II has been waged, and the issues are still in the balance. And at this writing, September 1951, it is common talk that World War III could break out momentarily. And the democracies of the world are now challenged by nations who have abandoned the semblance of law and justice and are ruled by terrorism and brute force. The progress by speed and thrills leads to domination by brute force. Shall we allow ourselves to be terrorized and submit to rule by brute force? The world wars were the product of generations of bitterness, envy, revenge, and greed, which had been sitting in the peoples of Europe until, like a volcano, It burst out in the War of 1914. The latter settlement of hostilities could not end war. It only suspended it. For the same producing causes of hate and revenge and greed continued with increased intensity. To end a war, the victors and the vanquished must do away with the causes of war. The peace treaty at Versailles was not the first of its kind. It was sequel of the preceding peace treaty at Versailles. There can be a war to stop war, but like the brotherhood, in quotes, it must be learned and practiced at home. Only a self-conquered people can stop war. A self-conquered people only, which is a self-governed people, can have the strength, the solidarity, and the understanding to really conquer another people without sowing the seeds of war, to be harvested in a future war. The conquerors who are self-governed will know that in order to settle a war, their own interest is also in the interest and welfare of the people whom they conquer. This truth cannot be seen by those who are blinded by hatred and too much self-interest. The world does not need to be made safe for democracy. It is we, the people, who must be made safe for democracy and for the world, before we and the world can have a democracy. We cannot begin to have a genuine democracy until each one of the people begins his self-government at home with himself. And the place to begin the building of the real democracy is right here at home in the United States. The United States of America is the chosen land of destiny, on which the people can prove that there can be and that there will be a genuine democracy, self-government. Now, I think it's interesting to talk about self-government, and some people say, well, isn't that just sort of a scam for people who to sort of indulge you to think that you can govern yourself, but meanwhile you don't really have a crack at it because you're not educated properly? You don't really know what's going on? Here is a man who was highly revered. He wrote this book, J. Krishnamurti. He spoke to more people than any other human being. He was discovered by the Theosophical Society, and the Theosophical Society, incidentally, was started right here in New York City. And here we are in New York City. And that is the clock tower over Union Square. Now right below here in Gramercy Park is Irving Street. And Irving Street is, I'm going to get a good shot here. Irving Street. Okay, down there is Irving Street. It's known for nice restaurants right now, but it goes right up into Gramercy Park. You can't see that in this location. Okay, so here I am now at the Henry George School up on 30th, and they let me come into the library because I've lent my own copy out. And I'm going to be talking about Book 5, The Insufficiency of Remedies Currently Advocated. Okay, 209. Let's look that up. Here we are. From the better education of the working classes and improved habits of industry and thrift. So let's put this to rest. From the diffusion of education and improved habits of industry and thrift, there is and always has been a widespread belief among the more comfortable classes that the poverty and suffering of the masses are due to their lack of industry, frugality, and intelligence. This belief, which at once soothes the sense of responsibility and flatters by its suggestion of superiority, is probably even more prevalent in countries like the United States, where all men are politically equal, and where, owing to the newness of society, the differentiation into classes has been of individuals rather than of families, than it is in older countries where the lines of separation have been longer and are more sharply drawn. It is but natural for those who can trace their own better circumstances to the superior industry and frugality that gave them a start and the superior intelligence that enabled them to take advantage of every opportunity, to imagine that those who remain poor do so simply from lack of these qualities. But whoever has grasped the laws of the distribution of wealth, as in previous chapters they have been traced out, will see the mistake in this notion. The fallacy is similar to that which would be involved in the assertion that every one of a number of competitors might win a race. That any one might is true, that every one might is impossible. For as soon as land acquires a value, wages, as we have seen, do not depend upon the real earnings or products of labor, but upon what is left to labor after rent is taken out. And when land is all monopolized, as it is everywhere except in the newest communities, rent must drive wages down to the point at which the poorest paid class will be just able to live and reproduce, and thus wages are forced to a minimum fixed by what is called the standard of comfort, that is, the amount of necessaries and comforts which habit leads the working classes to demand as the lowest on which they will consent to maintain their numbers. This being the case, industry, skill, frugality, and intelligence can avail the individual only insofar as they are superior to the general level, just as in a race speed can avail the runner only insofar as it exceeds that of his competitors. If one man works harder or with superior skill or intelligence than ordinary, he will get ahead. But if the average of industry, skill, or intelligence be brought up to the higher point, the increased intensity of application will secure but the old rate of wages, and he who would get ahead must work harder still. One individual may save money from his wages by living as Dr. Franklin did when during his apprenticeship and early journeyman days be concluded to practice vegetarianism, and many poor families might be made more comfortable by being taught to prepare the cheap dishes to which Franklin tried to limit the appetite of his employer Keimer as a condition to his acceptance of the position of comforter of opponents to the new religion of which Keimer wishes to become the prophet. Franklin, in his inimitable way, relates how Keimer finally broke his resolution and, ordering a roast pig, invited 2 lady friends to dine with him, but the pig being brought in before the company arrived, Keimer could not resist the temptation and ate it all himself. Okay, so meat's the first thing to go. But if the working classes generally come to live in that way, wages would ultimately fall in proportion, and whoever wished to get ahead by the practice of economy or to mitigate poverty by teaching it would be compelled to devise some still cheaper mode of living, of keeping soul and body together. If under existing conditions American mechanics would come down to the Chinese standard of living, they would ultimately have to come down to the Chinese standard of wages. Or if English laborers would content themselves with the rice diet and scanty clothing of the Bengali, labor would soon be as ill paid in England as in Bengal. The introduction of the potato into Iceland was expected to improve the condition of the poorer classes by increasing the difference between the wages they received and the cost of their living. The consequences that did ensue were a rise of rent and a lowering of wages, and with the potato blight, the ravages of famine among a population that had already reduced its standard of comfort so low that the next step was starvation. So he goes on, and basically, what is education going to do? As to the effects of education, it may be worthwhile to say a few words especially, for if there is a prevailing disposition to attribute it to something like a magical influence. Now, education is only education insofar as it enables a man to work more effectively to use his natural powers, and this is something that we call education in very great. And this is something that what we call education in very great part fails to do. I remember a little girl pretty well along in her school geography and astronomy who was much astonished to find that the ground in her mother's backyard was really the surface of the earth. And if you talk with them, you will find that a good deal of the knowledge of many college graduates is much like that of the little girl. They seldom think any better, and sometimes not so well as men who have never been to college. So he goes on to point out that, you know, if you educate people about what's really going on, they are going to not want monopoly, and so you'll see weaving itself among education is actually obscuring what's really happening. So he says, to make people industrious, prudent, skillful, and intelligent, they must be relieved from want. If you would have the slave show the virtues of the free man, you must first make him free. And I think that says it all. Okay, so here we are at the Henry George School of Social Science, and this is on 30th Avenue. And the consideration that we had earlier was what gets rid of poverty, and what I was just reading was about how education is not necessarily going to do it. That's what James Brown was talking about. He went to prison and he learned his lessons, but you could see if you look really, really carefully, he just basically learned how maybe there was some heartbreak, and he just tapped into something and said, I'm just not going to deal with this. But does that justify that type of treatment of the grinding poverty, where you only have some really exceptional people, like Henry George said? You know somebody's going to win the race, but you know not everybody's going to win the race. And you want to be able to provide for all, so you have the contributions of all, not just those who are exceptionally gifted and talented. And I was reading this book called Maggie, A Girl of the Streets, and it was, you know, a little bit depressing, talking about the squalid conditions at the early 19th century, 20th century, no 19th century, late 19th century. And then finally Krishnamurti saying, why are you being educated? So here I am taking visual therapy, and I'm looking at this beautiful blue-green light, and as soon as I came in and looked at it, I was relaxed. And I came in because although my sight is getting better and I can read without glasses, I'm getting headaches. So why did you put me on this?
Because I think you need to be rejuvenated. You're a little bit under the weather, and this is we call a parasympathetic type of activator. So when one is under the weather, that system needs to be picked up. It's anti-inflammatory, anti-infective, it relaxes the nervous system, it sort of simulates what happens to you when you lie down. Parasympathetic system takes over, when you stand up, the sympathetic system takes over. So I'm just giving you a little bit of this, usually about 20 minutes.
It's called light therapy.
Syntonic is the technical term, syntonics.
Syntonics. This is me in the syntonic machine. Under the weather, but getting better.
It hasn't turned again, has it, bad?
No.
I think that's good, maybe. Well, today's Jimmy's birthday. I'll say a little Christian.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
So what was that last one, the purple?
Purple. It was a heavy sensory motor depressant. It really quiets things down. And if there's any pain in the body, it helps eradicate it, pushes you in that direction.
It's funny, I felt like I could focus better.
Well, they all help balance you out.
So that you focus better.
So
I mean,
that you focus, think, feel, everything.
So I should turn it off?
Yeah.
Oh, it's kind of warm.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a bicycle path. That's good. How are you both?
Good.
Great. I've just been studying the perception of reality paper you wrote. Because I've been writing about that myself, perceptions of reality. And
That was the first job. I haven't really defined that at all.
because the thing that's really key is what it's coming down is this whole view of the observer, how the observer changes everything.
Right.
That's what's revolutionizing science.
That's what's called quantum. That's one of the laws of quantum physics, and it is an underlying principle that everything is conscious. Because without consciousness, there would be nothing material.
But that's not a quantum physics theory.
Yes, it is.
That everything is conscious?
Well, one of the you have to extend yourself a little.
Okay.
Assuming you become part of the experiment and your consciousness alters to the experiment, you draw on that and say, well, consciousness creates new arrangements, new things, and if you extend it further, consciousness creates material being. Without consciousness, there would be no material being. Things can be, energy and matter are synonymous, they're the same.
Right, because of the speed of light. Squared.
Well,
E equals mc squared, you take, you divide by c squared and you get...
Right. Well, true.
C equals
okay.
E over m.
That's the physical, that's the formula which translates one to the other. But apart from the mathematics, matter and energy are basically the same.
Right.
And a living being transforms one to the other seemingly effortlessly. Whereas if you tried to make matter out of energy, you'd have to go to enormous potential, you know. For instance, well, that's not quite true, but in the weak case where uranium splits in and of itself,
To lead and to...
you create, because of the weak force, you're allowed to translate matter into energy. But if your intention was to do that in another sense, you would require vast reservoirs of energy. But your body does it all the time.
Our body's an alchemical chamber, I think, is what Mr. Cheshire is saying right here, ladies and gentlemen. And
your body actually creates, as we were talking, elements out of nothing.
It does. Well, all biological, organic, living beings actually do that. They take in inorganic and they make it organic.
Oh, and more important, well, no,
yes. Well,
even more unbelievable is they create new elements.
They create new elements within the body.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you.
Let's assume you need calcium. You don't eat calcium. Where does the calcium come from?
The calcium comes from your own body's manufacturing.
And you try to create calcium, and how would you do it?
So does that reflect the idea of the solar energy within the human being? Because the way the sun creates the elements, there's this, in alchemical sciences and hermetic sciences, they say we are solar beings, essentially. And we can live off the rays of the sun.
Basically, all the stars.
And the stars create the chemicals. So we must have the same solar potential inside us.
It would seem.
It would seem that. So what can we do with this knowledge?
Live.
All right. Well, I think that's what we're doing. It's a beautiful day in Gramercy Park.
Ask him about transubstantiation.
Oh, yeah, Paula. Actually, along these same lines, which you're saying, Paula, my good friend Paula Gloria, has an idea about...
Is this Paula?
This is Paula.
Yes.
Transubstantiation, about the blood of Jesus.
Or anybody.
Or anybody?
Right.
Okay.
Now, I knew you were going to get on the subject, and I am not an authority.
No, we don't care about authorities. We just want to know what you know.
Our minister gave a talk on that the other day. He was rather upset with my interpretation.
What was your interpretation?
Well, it started when we were in Mongolia, and we ran into a group of Christians that I had never heard of before.
In Mongolia?
In Mongolia.
Mongolia, out of Mongolia?
Yeah, out of Mongolia.
Okay. Yeah,
They're called Nestorian Christians. So I started talking to this guy, and I said, what is this all about Nestorian Christians? I've never heard of this particular group. So, well, Nestor was a bishop of the Eastern Orthodox Church in, I think, about the 9th or 10th century. Now, this is why I'd have to go back. And
okay.
if this goes on tape, people can trip me up because I may have my dates.
Just more or less.
Not quite right, but at any rate, in the Middle Ages sometime,
right.
Yeah.
or earlier.
Right.
Substantially after Christ.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, way after Christ. And so he conceived of the glorious idea that the wafer and the wine were not just symbolic, but that they actually were, in fact, in a sense, that they were thought of and visualized and consumed
as the
actual blood and body of Christ.
The actual body and blood itself. Except, okay, I'm with you.
So the Greek church, of which he was a part,
the Greek Orthodox
was horrified. They said, this cannot be, it would be cannibalism. So guess what?
Yeah.
They threw him out of the church. And he started his own church, Nestorian Christians.
Okay.
And some of them are now in Mongolia. And Julie, I think some of them are down in India.
I'm sure.
They're scattered.
India. Yeah.
They're scattered. And as a consequence of this, the Roman Church was so imbued with the idea, they really were not thinking along these lines. They said, this man has something. We will adopt this principle. So they became imbued with transubstantiation.
The Roman Church?
The Roman
Catholic Church took it from this guy.
They became imbued with transubstantiation, which they now promote wholeheartedly. So when I went to the service, I was upset the other day because I was a pallbearer in a Roman Catholic funeral, and after all the Hail Marys, it just almost overwhelmed me. I thought, well, I loved the gal whose husband had died. I would have done anything for her. So I was going to go through the whole thing, and I thought, well, I'll go through everything. I don't care. Just lead me on. So I went through all the Hail Marys. We got to the Eucharist, which we're very familiar with in the Episcopal Church, because the Episcopal Church, the ceremonies and the service are almost identical.
As the Catholic, Roman Catholic.
So we got to, and I got up to go to the, to the Eucharist. And I thought, well, I'll go through the whole smear. And this young priest stopped me. He said, you cannot take this ceremony because you are not a Catholic. I said, well, I am a member of the All-Catholic Church. I don't happen to be a Roman Catholic the way you are, but I am a member of the All-Catholic Church. You wouldn't take because you weren't a
Catholic? God, that's amazing. That's shocking. Weren't you shocked?
Catholic means everything, all-inclusive.
A Roman Catholic.
Well, he's a Roman Catholic, and see, the Roman Church is only one of 5 branches of the all so-called Catholic Church.
Well, what else is in the Catholic Church? I thought it was only Roman Catholic.
Oh, listen, you've got the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Oh, but that's different. I wouldn't call those Catholic.
The
Orthodox.
Well, Catholic just means universal.
I thought Christian was. You're saying Christian and Catholic are the same thing.
Oh no.
No.
Catholic. Look in the dictionary. Catholic means all encompassing.
In our Nicene
everything.
Creed, we say the Holy Catholic Church.
In the Episcopal
does not
service,
mean the Roman
we all
Catholic
say
Church.
we're members of the Holy Catholic Church, which means all churches.
I see. So the Orthodox is a
the original church, Christian church, which was, you may call it a Catholic church if you like, had 5 branches. The first one was in Alexandria, which is now the Coptic Church.
The Coptic Church,
All right.
right.
One was in Antioch, which is almost defunct because Antioch is hardly
That's Syria, right? And what was
Syria.
that called?
Well, it was Antioch. It was one of the. It was larger at one time than the Roman Church.
And what was the name of that church? Was that just?
It was a Church of Antioch.
Oh, it's just the Antioch Church.
Okay.
These are the.
And then there was another one.
Paul talks about the 7 churches, right?
He did, and I don't. I
7 kingdoms.
I can identify 5. I'm not sure who the other 2.
So the other one was in Constantinople.
Right.
Okay.
That was the Greek Orthodox Church. And then there was one in Jerusalem, one in Antioch, one in Rome, and one in Cairo. Not Cairo. Yeah. Alexandria, Egypt.
Okay.
The first one, because Mark wrote the oldest. He wrote the oldest gospel. So the first church was in Alexandria.
Okay, what do you think of the Gospel of Judas that just was published? That's quite a controversy.
Well, how about all the other Gnostic Gospels?
Well, yeah, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas is actually very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely validity to those words of Jesus.
You have that tract I gave you from Gerald Massey.
Yes, and Gerald Massey was in on it long before any of those people. He talked about transubstantiation.
I know.
Long before. I mean, this is what the actual worship of Osiris was about, and the embalming and turning the pharaoh into the subset of Osiris himself.
Absolutely. No, the basic thought process of the Jewish church and of the early Christians grew out of the Egyptian ceremonies.
Yes, well, especially the Catholic with the frankincense and the high hats. That's pure Egyptian. That's more than the Jewish stuff. I think, the Jewish.
Well, if you go into the book of Proverbs and you go into the pyramid text, you read this out of Massey.
Right.
The rich man and the poor man, that the rich man isn't going to go to heaven, but because of the way he behaved, but the poor man will. That's all in the pyramid text.
Of Massey, from the Egyptians.
From the Egyptians, which were written long before the Jews went to Egypt.
Oh, yeah, they borrowed all that. Actually, my interview with Bruce Chilton, do you know who Bruce Chilton is? He wrote a book called Rabbi Jesus.
No, I don't know.
He talks about how when the Romans destroyed the old temple of the Jews in Jerusalem, that actually created the religion of the Jews. And of the Christians. That destruction formed 2 groups that went off in their own direction.
Makes sense. And the Gnostics, of course, were not the institutional. To preserve Christianity, they had to be an organization so it wouldn't splinter and dissolve.
Which it did. It splintered.
Which it splintered, and it was organized very much like the Roman legions. You had bishops and you had divisions, priests and so forth. The Gnostics were a far more spiritual group. But in defense of the institutional church, if it had been left totally in the hands of the Gnostics, it might have been forgotten.
There wouldn't have been a church, probably.
It might not have been.
What do you think these 2 billion people would have been if there was no Christian? Think they would have stayed pagans, or?
How about New Yorkers?
New Yorkers, they would have all become New Yorkers. No, it's fascinating, the history of religion, not the beliefs, but the tides of humanity as they gravitate to one belief system or another. I think we're actually transcending religion as a sort of belief system and becoming more of morality.
Well, I think morality now is a different story, because morality is a more pragmatic thing. And when I was at the DuPont company, I was in the new business section, and I spent most of my time on research. We used to go to these research seminars, and as one of the controversial topics we talked about, this man said, well, I think that the 10 Commandments came about independent of religion. It's a pragmatic thing as to how people behave. If they behave according to certain rules, then there was a playback. Life became better, so as generations proceeded, these laws of how you behave sort of fell out in a pragmatic way. It had little to do with the spiritual beliefs. It was an outgrowth of social custom.
Right. I mean, we basically, our religion is science. We cannot say we are connected to any one religion, people like you, me, Julie, Paula. We're basically in a new framework of science and spirit. We've evolved beyond the old religious formats. If I can speak for you.
Well,
is that true?
That's a hard, yes.
Because you're based on science. You're a man of science.
True.
And you're not run by the dogmas of religion.
The dogmas of religion, I tolerate, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and they may have moral justification, but they don't have a belief system.
Not spiritual justification.
Well, perceptual. Just talk about perception. They are not informing us about how to perceive the world. Well, and if they did, we'd be living 2,000 years ago. So.
But they served a purpose. I mean, as Massey said, people wondered about the great forces around, and the forces overcame them, and they didn't know how to. They took great, I would say, relief in thinking that a greater being could help them. You know, as they say in a foxhole, you don't find many atheists. You're praying the next shell isn't going to land on your head. You know?
No, that's fine, but we are starting to understand the forces of nature, and there's always will be a mystery.
In extremis, you're looking for anything. You're grasping for support.
Yeah.
And if there's some shred of evidence or belief or that a greater being is looking after you and you have no other way to turn, people, that's the way they turn. And who's to say that's wrong?
No.
If they turn in the right direction, but now if they turn on their neighbor and bury a hatchet in his head, that's not very good.
No, but we're not talking about that aspect of religion. We're talking about the religious part that tries to understand the world, and then we have science, so we can go beyond. We can evolve beyond creationism and integrate our intellect.
Now you have introduced another facet of the human condition that people would like to ignore, namely that they're curious.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
They're searching, they're missing something, and so they're searching for the unknown. The unknown beckons them on. I'm a member of that tribe.
The unknown tribe.
I'm always looking for something new.
Me too.
Now why?
Because that's human nature.
Are you satisfied with your present? Would you like to improve?
I'm very satisfied, and there's always more.
But you are searching for something beyond what you know today.
Right, because I know that's part of why we're here, is to keep...
If you believe in a greater spirit, don't you think he imbued you with this quality? That's part of evolving.
Yeah, but that's the two worlds. The human side is trying to understand the greater spirit side. That's the left brain, right brain. We're always trying to understand ourselves. The human's trying to understand the great spirit. We're moving closer to the horizon as the horizon moves further.
But this now is contraposed. People think that human nature is locked in a certain life force, which means to be human, that you really shouldn't change. And one of the practical things that's coming up is, what does it mean to be human? Are you entitled in biomedical science to really search for the superior being? Not to remedy the diseases you have, or the condition you have, which renders you less susceptible to perform, but to try to become better than anyone else? Are you entitled?
I don't think it's about becoming better than anyone else. It's getting closer to the mystery of who I am. That's the search.
Well, that's permissible.
Well,
but now there's another group out there that would like to say, I'll put it in crude terms.
Okay.
This child has got an IQ that's quite high, and he's well adapted, and he's doing well. I think we can rearrange the conditions of human life, eugenics, so that we can breed a superior being. And you know, this leads, is this, somehow we don't think that this is proper, and yet we're driven, people naturally are driven to evolve. Don't you think in another million years or another 10 million years, if we live that long, that people will be different and more advanced than we are today genetically?
I don't know. I don't know if we are 10,000 years since where we've come.
But that's a short time. How about the Neanderthals?
Yeah, maybe some people say they were more evolved than the Cro-Magnons, but that's not evolution. Evolution is turning what we already have to a higher level of consciousness. It's not we're finished with biological evolution. Refer to my interview with Bruce Lipton. You'll understand that.
Now there, I don't think you're right. No.
Well, you think we're still evolving biologically?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I'm open to that. I just think our next step is to evolve as a community.
Let me ask you this. Why wouldn't we be?
No, I'm not saying we're a finished product, but, you know...
Are we a finished product?
But who knows what evolution really looks like? We can't say, we can't selectively, genetically... That's up to nature.
Maybe we can.
I don't think we know enough about biology in order to understand.
Perhaps what people are searching for that. Let's go back to my shrimp text.
Okay. I love shrimp.
We were trying to farm shrimp.
Yeah, in South America.
All right. Now, shrimp have been in stasis for 30 million years. Stasis, meaning...
They have not evolved.
If you go back 30 million years, the Penaeid shrimp we have today are identical to the ones that were 30 million years ago.
Effective, it relaxes the nervous system. It sort of simulates what happens to you when you lie down. The parasympathetic system takes over. When you stand up, the sympathetic system takes over. So I'm just giving you a little bit of this, usually about 20 minutes.
It's called light therapy.
Syntonic is the technical term, syntonics.
Syntonics. This is me in the syntonic machine. Under the weather, but getting better.
It hasn't turned again, has it, Matt?
No.
I think that's good. Maybe. Well, today's Jimmy's birthday. I'll say a little Christmas.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome, Paul.
So what was that last one, the purple?
Purple. It was a heavy sensory motor depressant. It really